Okay, how are you?
Good, Debbie. So yeah, I just rewatched this movie for the first time in too long. So
Oh
I'm
my
actually,
gosh.
yeah, I'm glad you picked it. I didn't realize like how much I like. Well, I knew I liked it because it's one of those great movies that you know you should like and you enjoy it, but I definitely should have rewatched it again.
I know what you mean. I looked at it totally. I really looked at it this time and I was just blown away by it. And knowing what I know about screenwriting now, I'm just floored by how good the beginning of that movie is.
It's not just something that's in the background, it's really much in the foreground of the movie, and the American viewpoint on a lot of
Mm-hmm.
different things is portrayed as black and white, right and wrong, very naive, and like I think that's the viewpoint that a lot of foreigners have when viewing Americans in America. It's like we kind of view things in um, a certain way that isn't necessarily productive,
Mm-hmm.
because things are there are lots of shades of gray going on, and Holly, the main character in this, is forced to confront all of those shades of gray throughout the movie as he learns more about his best friend and what he really was, what he did, the consequences of what he did, and also the consequences of him deciding if he wants to help the police capture him or not.
Really captures the struggle to figure out how to choose a side, how to choose what you're going to do, what's right and wrong. And film noir is, of course, the perfect medium for doing that in. The cinematography, the story, the choices, everything. The character himself, the fact that he's kind of like a dime novelist and maybe tells simplistic stories from the point of view of somebody with a more complex outlook, has to grapple with these difficult situations.
It's kind of topical in a way with what's going on in the world, not the coronavirus, but with the Floyd killing with the cops. In
Mm-hmm.
that you have these cops that, they have a crisis of consciousness where it's like some cops do terrible things, but you have the union and you have the brotherhood where it's like they say, well, one bad apple. Well, if one bad apple does something bad and the rest of you are just complicit with it, then you're all bad apples in a way, even though it's just one person. And then you have to decide, like, all right, am I going to be betraying this brotherhood, this union, my partner, the guy who has my back? Like, if there's going to be some kind of like shootout, like, am I betraying them by doing the right thing? Like, how much am I going to fight with my conscience to, like, you know, I kind of feel like some parallels with what's going in the world today and what's going on with this character and the movie, between the lead characters. What do you think of that? Am I reaching there, or is there some real parallels?
No, I think there are some parallels there. I think the idea that the world is a much more complicated place than we'd like to think, that it's very hard, like villains, the idea of villains in general. I recently heard an author say that she had a hard time writing villains, and I thought, well, all you have to do is think of them as really misguided people with the best intentions. It's just that they think that what they're doing is right when it's so thoroughly wrong. And, how do you get at that when it's part of a system?
Yeah, and sometimes right and wrong is even more complicated than that. It could just be a matter of point of view, you know? If
Mm-hmm.
you don't understand someone else's point of view, you could be doing wrong things in their eyes. But if you aren't open to looking at things through another pair of eyes, then you could be the villain, and not even know it.
From their
So,
perspective, yeah.
yeah, so there was a lot of behind the scenes things going on, a lot of tensions. This, like you mentioned before, this film was very much a compromise with a lot that we see on the screen, from the final cut with the American version that we appreciate now, to like what could have been, but also with the casting. What did you think of Joseph Cotton? There was pushback from Reed. I think he wanted James Stewart to play the lead role.
Well, I thought Joseph Cotton was perfect, actually. I mean, I'm a fan of Joseph Cotton anyway, but he has that kind of, there's something in his manner that was just right for the part. He was inquisitive. There was a part where he's at the theater, where he's flipping through his program, and the first thing I thought of was the scene in Citizen Kane, where he's flipping through the program, making paper dolls. But that's not what he's doing. But it just made me think of that. And I thought, okay, he's kind of like this American who's looking at this place, somewhat alienated, trying to understand. He hears a contradiction in how Lyme is supposed to have died, gets curious, and wants to get at the truth. And I could picture him doing that. James Stewart might have been effective, but somehow I just can't see it. I can't see it as much. Maybe because it didn't happen. Maybe it's as simple as that.
There was also some pushback on Wells being in the film as well, which is kind of interesting because a lot of people know the film because of Wells and his performance. And not just with this movie, but Wells spent a lot of his career playing these type of roles, a role in which he is not just a supporting character, but he's a supporting character that almost feels like a main character because before he comes on the screen, he's talked about and referenced, and there's this aura about him. So once he hits the screen, you almost feel like, you know, you've been with this character the whole movie. It's just that now you're seeing him because the other characters reference him and talk about him so much. And Wells has this huge presence about him when he steps on the screen. Part of that is the way he filmed himself. He's already a big guy, but the camera angles he would use in his own movies to film him and other filmmakers would use to film him made him seem larger than life. And his voice, his presence, his acting, he wasn't afraid to overact at times to heighten that sense of, fantasy of like this larger than life figure. He would do this partially because as a filmmaker, he acted in his own movies, and it's hard to direct yourself as being the lead in your own films. I know that all too well. Even on my small scale, I can only imagine on the scale of movies he was doing. Citizens Kane, one of the greatest movies of all time. But also, he did this because he would act to get money to fund his movies. So he couldn't spend a lot of time on set. So he would just have to take these smaller roles. But a lot of time, those smaller roles would be these larger than life characters. Some of my favorites being this one at number one, Compulsion, Tomorrow is Forever, which is a very small movie, but I just love it. Jane Eyre, and then to a lesser extent, like Confidential Report in a Trial.
Well, I think he's great in this movie, and I especially love the way he's revealed. What you said about him being built up as a presence throughout the beginning of the film is very effective. And the reveal is great with the cat. The cat only likes one person, Harry Lime. So when the cat goes to that doorway and rubs against that guy, you know who's standing there.
And that's all for us as the audience, because it's not really anything that really helps the characters figure out who he is. It's just something that lets the audience know. Before the reveal to the characters, we already know before he comes out the shadow that that's Wells there.
It's a great use of cinema there, of visual imagery and visual rather than stating something. And then he's hiding in there, and it's great the way the window is, the drape is shoved aside, the window's open, the woman starts yelling, and there in the light he's revealed, corporeal,
Yeah. The other thing interesting about Wells is that for me being like a huge Wells fan, he's the one that kind of got me into film noir with Touch of Evil. After I saw that, I was like, man, I got to see all of Wells' movies, and I got to see every film noir ever made. But I always like looking back now, long after he's gone, watching his movies, I always think, man, like his first movie is considered maybe the greatest movie ever made. And he's such a talented director. Like, why didn't he get more budgets and why didn't he get like more opportunities? And the more you read about him and you read between the lines, because a lot of what you read about him is kind of fiction, some of that by him himself. But he was a very self-destructive guy, even the way he almost ate himself into a grave. Very self-destructive, and he was very difficult to work with at times. And even on this production, which from all accounts went pretty smoothly, he did show up late, which forced them to have stand-ins in for a few of his scenes, the chase scene, and I believe the scene where he sticks his fingers through the sewer,
Mhm.
because he showed up late on set. And when he did show up late and found out they were shooting in a real sewer, he refused to come back on set, and they had to build an entire sewer set for him to finish those scenes, which is kind of interesting because I wonder how much he shot on that first day, because if they built a set for all those scenes, that was some impressive set, you know? So what
I
do you think? What do you think
know.
about that aspect of it?
That's amazing. I had no idea. I mean, I knew that he didn't show up a lot, but I didn't know he built a whole set like that for him. Um, that's going out of the quite out of the way to oblige someone. I don't know.
But
I
shooting in
do
a real
know.
sewer is kind of crazy too, as well. You know,
It is. All of it is kind of crazy. Yeah.
he didn't take a lot of. He gets a lot of credit for a lot that goes on in the movie because it's such a great movie, and I think with Cal Reed, the director of the movie, he isn't looked at as like a top echelon filmmaker. I think that's because a lot of the movies he made after this weren't quite as good. But if you look at like the best films in his filmography, he's a really great filmmaker. It's just that when you keep making movies, maybe past your due date, in a way, a crude way to putting it, you can kind of tarnish, your legacy a little bit. And I think that's maybe kind of what he did, because I think Wells didn't take a lot of credit that people were trying to give him for a lot of what we're seeing on screen. um, Maybe Kyle Reed was influenced by a lot of Wells' film because he did make a lot of his better films before this. Wells did, and a lot of his great film noirs were made before this. So you can argue that yeah, his influence was there, whether it was direct or not. But from my understanding, the only thing Wells directly said that he did was the cuckoo clock monologue, and I think he said it was his idea for the fingers through the sewer shot. And I think that's all that I've read that I can concretely say that I'm pretty sure came from Wells.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think Wells kind of has a kind of presence that overwhelms the film in a sense. People associate the film with Wells himself, and there's this tendency to think that he must have had this tremendous influence as a director. But I think his influence as a director really starts with Citizen Kane. I mean, that movie was groundbreaking, and to say that Carol Reed was not good or was somehow lesser as a director based on any similarities to Wells' style, in a sense, is not fair. You know what I'm saying? Because that particular film influenced film so much that I, I, I think it's a little unfair to Carol Reed to not acknowledge what a great job he did as a
Yeah.
director.
Yeah, the shot composition in this film was great. A lot of Dutch angles, which today isn't looked at fondly because I think it was overused. I think maybe the late 90s, early 2000s. I forget exactly when there was this huge craze for Dutch angles. But I think Battlefield Earth was probably the movie that like jumped the shark with Dutch angles. But this film used it very effectively because it kind of threw you off kilter a little bit, with the framing of a lot of these shots. And I think the cinematographer won an Academy Award for this movie as well. When you watch a mystery, it really has to be good to watch it again, because part of the mystery is not knowing what's coming, but
Hmm.
knowing like how it plays out and knowing like what the end result of everything's going to be. How do you feel about the pacing on your rewatching of it recently?
I think, compared to modern movies, it's slow, yes. But I think there's enough of a question of what happens next to keep you interested.
What did you think of his character as far as like he's not viewed as a threat at all from the beginning? He has the sergeant that he's yelling back at, and the guy doesn't even like think, "Oh, well, I'm gonna arrest this guy or this guy's dangerous." He just kind of brushes him off. Even his love interest with Anna, she just says, "Hey, you should get a girlfriend," when it's obvious that he's in love with her. It's like he's not viewed as a threat. He's not viewed as like a real man. He's almost viewed as like a child or a kid. Like, what do you think of his portrayal, and from that standpoint of like not the typical masculine lead role?
Yeah, I think that they were kind of they looked at him as kind of a nuisance, really.
There are a couple of great lines in this film, and I think it's a sign of a great line where it kind of sums up a lot about the movie and the characters when the line comes out. One was,
Best friend I ever had.
and it's kind of interesting because it kind of sums up how he feels about Harry.
Best friend I ever had.
But and then when you see the end, you realize that how we perceive people and how he perceived Harry as being this great friend. Harry didn't perceive him that way at all. And I think that that line kind of just comes back at the end, where it's just like Harry was ready to kill him at the end of the movie, without hesitation. And
Hmm.
he's going through all of this journey, most of the journey of the film, up until the end, where he comes to a realization that this Harry wasn't such a great guy, was him he went all the way there to Vienna because Harry said he had a job for him. So he's going to another country to visit his friend. When he finds out his friend's dead, he wants to investigate and make sure, like, when he thinks it might not have been an accident, like, was he killed? And when he is confronted with the people that potentially killed him, he doesn't shy away. He lets them know he's not going to back down. In that scene we talked about a little bit earlier, where they're confronting him in the room where he's giving that speech in front of the writers.
Hmm.
So he's going through all of this thing because he thinks that this guy is the best friend he ever had. And to Harry, it's just like, dude, I could care less. It's just kind of interesting with that way, because even with Anna, it's the same situation where it's like he's in love with Anna and she's like, go get a girlfriend. And that famous last shot where he's waiting for her and then she just
Hmm.
keeps walking past him.
Doesn't even look at him.
Doesn't even look at him.
Yeah,
It's an amazing way to end a film.
it is. It is. And the funny thing is, you can understand. You can understand her. You can understand him. It's
Yeah. I just
it's
think
like,
that line works so well on the
hmm.
rewatch, because you know how everything plays out. And to hear him say that, knowing how this thing is going to end, like he was the best friend I ever had, like I don't know, that line just it resonates more on the second viewing in watching it, and it really says a lot about the character and the journey he goes on. And this one, another one that Anna said, this one about Harry.
He never grew up. The world grew up around him, that's all.
To him, he's just having fun. This is all a game, but he's only looking at it through his perspective. It's like, hey,
Hmm.
like, I just faked my own death. Like, I didn't kill anybody, or, I'm just making money with these drugs and selling them for profit. I'm not killing anybody. But then when, you go through the hospital and you see the consequences for his actions. But again, he's just being kind of like naive or ignorant, or however you want to put it, but he's not really looking at it through the lens of, well, these are the consequences for my actions. I'm just here having a good time making money. So I
Right.
thought that line kind of had a lot of meaning as well.
He's all about he's surviving. He's all about survival, no matter what. I mean, And, so he has to sell a few bad drugs to do it. Does that make him a bad person? If a few people die because of what he did, is that so awful? Look at all those people out there, got seen from the Ferris wheel.
Look down there. Would you really feel any pity if one of those dots stopped moving forever? If I offered you 20,000 pounds for every dot that stopped, would you really, old man, tell me to keep my money? Or would you calculate how many dots you could afford to spin? Free of income tax, only. Free of income tax. The only way you can save money nowadays.
He can rationalize it to himself. It's just rationalization. And people do it all the time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And another thing I didn't realize on the on previous viewings is that he had dealings with the Russians in this movie. He was constantly selling out Anna to the Russians, and they were protecting him.
Can I have that woman's passport? The Anna Schmidt one.
Oh. We're not going to pick her up for that, are we?
What can we do? We have our instructions.
And it's done so subtly, like you can watch it on the first viewing and not even notice it.
Not get it. Yeah, I know. The whole relationship there with Anna and him and the passport, the papers, everything. I noticed it much more this time. It's like I was really paying attention to what was going on and focused in on all the conflicting loyalties and so on.
I don't know if it's definitely the #1 British film, because I love a lot of David Lean films, but this is
Me too.
if this is not the best, it's in the conversation as the best.
Maybe
British
the
film.
best film noir he ever made. How's that? I don't know how many he made.
The best film noir that Cal Reed made?
Yeah, or that maybe the best British film noir.
That's a low bar, though. It's not.
I'm just trying to figure out where they got this.
There aren't that many great British film noirs.
Film noirs, no.
That's setting the bar kind of low. It's setting the bar
True
low.
that.
Yeah. So, no, it's a great film. But I do like. I think I may like Lawrence of Arabia a little bit more.
Oh my gosh, I love that movie.
Yeah, but this is still an amazing film as well. So I won't argue with it, because it's just bringing attention to a film that should be watched. So it's not a tragedy calling this the best British film ever made, but
Certainly one of the best.
Yeah, definitely a great one. So. All right, thank you so much for doing this with me, Debbie, and hopefully we'll do it again.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.